I remember exactly how she said it. Not angry, not cruel, just calm. As if she was finally sure. You'll never make it. Not like this. You're chasing a dream that isn't real. She stood there, arms crossed, staring at the startup binder I had left open on the kitchen table. My plans. My pitch deck. My 3 years of blood, sweat, and blind hope. She didn't slam the door. She didn't yell. She just turned, walked into the bedroom, packed a suitcase, and left a note that simply read, "This isn't the life I signed up for. I'm tired of waiting." I sat there on the floor, alone, staring at the empty chair across from me. That chair used to hold her laughter. Now it was just silent. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even call her. Instead, I opened that binder again, not because I believed in it at that moment, but because it was the only thing I had left that still felt like mine. 3 days later, a mutual friend told me she had moved into a condo uptown, with someone else. Apparently, this new guy had a real job. Apparently, he didn't waste time building apps that no one wants. What stung, wasn't that she left? It was how right she thought she was when she did. It echoed in my head every night like a broken alarm. You'll never make it. And the worst part, a small part of me believed it too. I wasn't always like this. I had a solid job before, safe, steady, forgettable, middle management in a mid-sized company. I showed up, did the work, and left. But deep down, I knew I wasn't built for routine. I had an idea that wouldn't leave me alone. Something I believed could fix a very specific pain point in how people interact with digital tools. I had user interviews, mock-ups, even a half-broken prototype. But what I didn't have was time, or funding, or someone who believed in it enough to stand next to me in the storm. She wanted weekend brunches, Instagram vacations, a ring, and a schedule. I wanted 3 more months of runway. Turns out, you can't ask someone to wait forever. But you also can't forget what they said when they walked away, especially when they were smiling like they already knew how the story ends. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up sketching out every feature my app needed, every flaw in my pitch. I started cold emailing people I admired, founders, developers, anyone. No one replied. But I didn't stop, because something changed that night. She thought she had ended the story. But really, she had just written the first line of the chapter where I stopped needing her, and started building something that could never be taken away again. The hardest part wasn't that she left. It was waking up the next morning and realizing no one was coming. No texts, no calls, no gentle voice asking if I'd eaten. Just silence. Silence and the sound of my own doubt, breathing louder than ever. I'd built so much of my life around we. Now I had to remember what it meant to build just for me. I made coffee, spilled half of it on the counter, and stood there staring at the stain for a full minute. That's when it hit me. No one was going to clean this up but me. No one was going to fix my life but me. So I made a rule. Every time I wanted to check her Instagram, I had to ship a feature. Every time I wanted to reread old texts, I had to send a cold email. I turned heartbreak into a task list. Was it healthy? Probably not. Did it work? More than I expected. The first few weeks were brutal. I slept on a mattress with no bed frame, ate ramen twice a day, said I'm doing great to people who didn't ask. But I kept building. The prototype slowly started to take shape. Clunky, ugly, but it worked. And every tiny progress felt like revenge. Not just on her, but on every voice that ever laughed when I said I was building something real. I wasn't trying to prove her wrong anymore. I just didn't want her to be the last voice in my head. One night, around 2 a.m., I got an email back. It was from a developer in Berlin. He'd seen my Reddit post buried under 3 downvotes and said, "It's not perfect, but the core idea is smart. If you want help, I'm interested." We started messaging. He didn't ask about my past. He didn't care why I was up coding at 4 a.m. He just showed up, consistent, honest, brutally critical. Exactly what I needed. Soon we had a small Slack group. 4 people, different countries, one shared obsession. That obsession was the thing that finally made me forget to check her social media. Still, every time I hit a roadblock, I'd hear it again. "You'll never make it." But that voice started to lose power. Not because I was over her, but because I was finally under something that mattered more. Purpose. Every night I stayed up. Every bug I fixed. Every tiny win. It added bricks to a wall that made it harder and harder for doubt to climb over. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. No posts. No humble brags. No late night still grinding stories. I wanted the silence to witness the version of me she didn't believe could exist. Then something unexpected happened. An angel investor I cold emailed weeks earlier replied, "Can you show me a working demo?" I didn't have one that I was proud of, but I sent it anyway. 2 days later, we were on a call. He didn't ask about my resume. He didn't ask how I'd lost everything before this. He just said, "You've clearly been through something, and you didn't quit. That matters." I wasn't ready to hope again. But maybe, just maybe, this thing was no longer just mine. It was becoming something real, something visible, something she'd hear about one day. In a way I wouldn't even need to explain. I didn't tell anyone about the call. Not my parents, not my friends. Not even the Berlin Dave who had become the closest thing I had to a co-founder. I wanted to keep it mine, like a fragile flame that might go out if too many people looked at it. The investor was direct, sharp, the kind of guy who didn't waste words. He said, "Your idea's raw, but your obsession is loud. That's a good thing." He asked what I needed. I hesitated. I wasn't used to anyone offering help without judgment attached. I told him the truth. I need 3 months, enough to breathe, enough to build it right. He nodded. "Send me a one-pager by tomorrow. If it checks out, I'll wire you 15K. 15,000. It wasn't life-changing. It wasn't a runway. But it was a message from the universe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely insane. I worked on that one-pager all night. I deleted more words than I wrote. It had to feel like me, not like a pitch deck clone. At 6:42 a.m., I sent it. At 9:17 a.m., he replied, "Let's do it." And just like that, my first funding came in. No handshake, no champagne, just a ping in my bank account that whispered, "Get to work." With the money came pressure, but it was a different kind of weight. Not like when she'd stare at my screen and sigh, "Are you still on that thing?" This was pressure I chose. And for the first time in a long time, it felt good to carry something heavy. I started hiring part-time help. A UI designer in Poland, a tester in the Philippines, and the Berlin dev, now full-time. The app got smoother, cleaner, it mattered now. But some nights, in the quiet, I still heard her voice, not in anger, in disbelief. "You? A founder?" One evening, after pushing a new build, I checked LinkedIn. Just habit. And there she was. New photo, new job. The guy she left me for was now listed as her fiancé. Good for them. No sarcasm. No rage. Just silence. I didn't click her profile. I didn't want to know more. Because in that moment, for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about what came next. Then came the email. "Hi, I work with a tech blog. We noticed what you're building. Mind if we run a feature on your story?" I froze. I hadn't done any press. No posts, no PR. I asked, "How'd you hear about us?" Their reply, "A friend of a friend used your tool, said it changed how they worked, said the guy who made it had something to prove." I said yes to the feature. It ran 2 weeks later, got picked up by another site, and suddenly, cold emails weren't so cold anymore. Accelerators, VCs, strategic partners. Doors I'd been knocking on for years were now opening on their own. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Because the higher I climbed, the quieter the past became. And I knew this wasn't revenge. This was relief. The blog feature changed everything. Not overnight, but in waves. New names started appearing in my inbox. Some excited, some skeptical. But the tone was different now. They weren't asking what I was trying to build. They were asking how I did it. Suddenly, people were forwarding my tool to coworkers. The Slack group turned into a private Discord with over 300 members in 2 weeks. Beta users became early adopters. Early adopters became paying customers. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I got a message from her friend, one of those people who used to politely smile at my startup ideas like I was a kid with a lemonade stand. She wrote, "Hey, saw the article, that's really cool. Didn't know you were still working on that, hope you're well." No mention of her. No direct questions. Just enough of a crack to say, "We see you now." I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because I didn't owe anyone a narrative anymore. What I was building spoke louder than I ever could. I didn't want to be the guy who flexed in DMs. I wanted to be the guy who outlasted the silence. Then came the podcast invite. One of the hosts was a founder I used to cold email years ago. He never replied back then. Now he called me a quiet innovator. I said yes. Not for clout, but because I wanted to see if I could tell the story without bitterness. The episode aired on a Tuesday. By Friday, the app's usage spiked 30%. My Berlin co-founder messaged me, "I think this is real now." I replied, "It was always real. They just didn't know where to look." The money came next. A pre-seed round. Small, lean, but powerful. It gave us space to hire, to breathe, to plan beyond the next week. And that's when I saw it. A follow notification. Her. She hadn't blocked me. Hadn't unfollowed me. She'd just watched from a distance. For months, maybe. And now she was back in view. I didn't click her profile. Didn't snoop. But a few days later, another message came in. This time from her sister. Saw the podcast. You sound different, stronger. Hope you're happy. No venom. No sarcasm. Just a thread floating loose, waiting to be pulled. I didn't pull it. Because here's the thing about people who leave when you're down. They don't get a front row seat when you rise. Not out of spite, but out of respect for the version of you that kept going when no one was watching. I wasn't angry anymore. Just aware. Aware of how much I'd rebuilt in silence, and how little I missed the noise that used to fill the space where belief should have been. It started with a scene. One of my stories, a behind-the-scenes post about a design decision, got picked up by a tech Instagram page. Thousands of views. Hundreds of comments. But one notification hit different. Your ex-wife viewed your story. No message. No emoji reaction. Just that quiet little scene. It felt like a ghost had passed through the room. I stared at the screen for a second. Not because I missed her, but because I realized she hadn't seen me in a long time. Not really. She'd seen the version of me that struggled to explain why the rent was late. She'd seen the tired eyes, the excuses, the endless just give me more time speeches. But this wasn't for her. It never was. 3 days later, I got the message. "Hey, I saw your interview, you really did it. I wasn't expecting that. Just wanted to say, I'm happy for you, really." I reread it 3 times. Not because it was long, but because of what it didn't say. No apology, no regret. Just a soft tap on the door she once slammed shut. I didn't respond. I almost did. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to say, "Thanks, hope you're well too." But I stopped. Because this wasn't a reunion. It was a reflex. A memory of a man who used to need her validation to feel real. And that man was gone. Instead, I got back to work. We had a major feature rollout coming up, something that would change how our users handled collaboration. It had nothing to do with her, and everything to do with who I was becoming. But that message did something. It cracked open a part of me I hadn't looked at in months. Not because I was still hurt, but because I needed to remember why I had started this journey. It was never about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming the parts of me that had been dismissed, doubted, and quietly destroyed. Later that week, I got another email. Not from her, from an investor. He'd seen the growth. He wanted in. Bigger check. More expectations. We scheduled a meeting. At the end of the call, he asked, "By the way, what made you build this? What was the moment that pushed you to finally go all in?" I paused. For the first time, I told the truth, the whole truth. Someone once told me I'd never make it. And I believed her. For a while. Then I decided I didn't have to. He smiled. That's the best pitch I've ever heard. That night, I finally opened her message again. And I wrote 2 words. Thank you. Not for the pain. Not for the silence. But for giving me something to outgrow. After I sent those 2 words, thank you, I turned off my phone. No overthinking. No checking if she replied. Just peace. A quiet, almost sacred kind of peace. Not because anything was resolved, but because I realized I no longer needed resolution. Some stories don't need a dramatic ending. Some ghosts don't need to be chased. They just need to fade. The product was growing faster than we'd planned. Every week brought new challenges, scaling, hiring, legal paperwork, decisions that could either break or build the company. But through all that noise, something deeper was shifting. I was becoming someone I could respect. Not the guy chasing an outcome, but the man owning his process. And then, something unexpected happened. A friend invited me to speak on a founder panel. I almost said no. I still hated being the center of attention. But he insisted, said it might help someone who was where I'd been. So I went. 3 other founders, a small audience, Nothing flashy. I told my story, not the polished version, the messy one. The loneliness, the ramen, the silent nights. The part about the email divorce? They gasped. But when I got to the moment I chose to keep going, the room went still. No questions, no shifting in seats. Just that beautiful, aching stillness of people who get it. After the event, a woman came up to me. Not flashy, not trying too hard. Just real. She said, "I don't usually come to these things. But someone forwarded me the event page, said your story reminded them of mine. I'm glad I came." We talked for 20 minutes. Not about tech, not about startups. About silence, resilience, how pain either breaks you open or seals you shut. She'd chosen to break open. So had I. We didn't exchange numbers. No forced next steps. Just a shared glance that said, if the path crosses again, let it. And that was enough, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't craving closure. I was inviting openness. A week later, I saw her name again. Not the woman from the event, my ex-wife. She'd tagged me in a post. Something generic, proud of how far he's come, wishing him the best. It got likes. Mutual friends commented. I didn't, because my story didn't need her narration anymore. It had its own rhythm now, its own gravity, and I wasn't orbiting her memory anymore. I was building something alive. Something rooted, something permanent, not to show the world I'd moved on. But because I had, success is loud, not just in headlines or bank statements, but in the way people suddenly start responding faster, smiling longer, asking more personal questions like they always believed in you. It's a strange noise, not unpleasant, but not entirely honest either. After the podcast, the product landed a write-up in a major publication. We didn't pitch it. A journalist found us through a user review on Reddit. When the article dropped, my inbox exploded. Old co-workers, college classmates, people who hadn't spoken to me since the garage phase. I always knew you had it in you. Man, this is so inspiring. Let's catch up soon. Catch up? You weren't around when I couldn't afford coffee. That week, our subscriber count tripled. Investors offered more than we needed. And for the first time, I felt uneasy. Not because of the money, but because I wasn't sure who was clapping for me and who was clapping for the noise. Then came the invitation, a startup award gala, black tie, spotlight, my name listed under Founder of the Year. I hesitated. The old me would have said yes instantly, just to prove I belonged. But now, I wasn't sure, because what mattered most to me wasn't the applause. It was that quiet moment at 2:34 a.m. when our servers handled a 5 bikes traffic surge without crashing. When the Polish UI designer sent me a message that simply said, "This product makes me proud." That was the win. Still, I went. Not for the award, but to watch, to see what that world looked like from the inside. It was polished, scripted, everyone smiling just a little too hard. I recognized faces from LinkedIn, people I'd begged for a 10-minute call 2 years ago. Now they handed me champagne and asked how I cracked virality. Virality. I built pain into a product. I built doubt into design. I didn't go viral. I survived. They called my name. I stood, walked up, gave the shortest speech of the night. Success isn't loud when it's real. It's quiet. It shows up in the work, not the photos. Thank you. No mic drop. Just truth. Later that night, outside the venue, I sat alone near a fountain. No photographers. No noise. Just my phone buzzing in my pocket. One text. From the woman at the panel event. Saw your name in the news. I smiled. Thought I'd say hi. I replied, "Hey, I smiled too." Sometimes, that's enough. No chase. No agenda. Just connection on your own terms. Because when you've built something from silence, you don't need the world to hear it echo. You just need it to stand. The email came on a Tuesday morning. Subject line, acquisition interest, serious offer. It wasn't spam. It wasn't vague. It was from a VP at a well-known company, one I'd followed for years. They wanted to buy us. Not partner, not invest, buy, outright. The number? Mid-7 figures. Enough to pay back every loan I'd ever taken. Enough to disappear for a decade and live quiet. Enough to never have to prove myself again. I stared at the number, and for a moment, I laughed. Not out of joy, out of disbelief. Because this, all of it, had started on a fold-out IKEA table with a broken chair and ramen cups stacked like trophies of survival. And now, this? I didn't respond immediately. I walked. No music, no podcasts. Just me and the weight of the decision. What would it mean to sell? Yes, financial security. But also, the end of something sacred. Not the code, not the brand, but the fight. The silent hours when no one believed. The voice that said, keep going, when there was no audience. Could I sell that? I called Berlin, told my co-founder. He went quiet. Then said, congrats, but are we done? I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my old notes, the ones I'd written after the divorce. The first sketches, the original why. It read, build something that makes you proud, even if no one claps. They were clapping now. Hard, but was I still proud? I scheduled a call with the company. They were polite, complimentary, slick. We love your product. We see potential to scale. We could plug it into our ecosystem overnight. It made sense, too much sense, which is why something felt off. Because this company, they'd laid off half their team last year, automated support, prioritized profit over people. If I sold, what would they do to the thing I'd bled for? Would they keep the team, honor the users, or would they squeeze it dry and toss it? I asked the VP direct, why buy us? Why not build your own version? He smiled. Because your version has soul, and that's harder to replicate than features. He meant it as a compliment, but it sounded like a warning. After the call, I sat in the dark. No music, no buzz, just the quiet reminder. I didn't build this to escape poverty. I built it to reclaim my identity. To prove, not to her, not to them, but to myself, that I was not disposable. The next morning, I wrote back. Thank you for the offer. Truly, but this company isn't just a product, it's a process, one I'm not done walking yet. No drama, no negotiation, just peace. I looked at my reflection. Not the man who got left behind, not the man begging for a chance, but the one who chose the long road, even when the shortcut glittered. And somehow, that felt richer than the number. A year passed, quietly. No flashy announcement, no viral campaigns, just steady growth. Our product became the default for small teams tired of bloated tools. We didn't scale to the moon. We scaled where it mattered. Support tickets answered like conversations. Users who felt heard. And that was the legacy I never knew I wanted. I still got emails. From old friends. From people who had doubted. From the woman I once called home. Her messages grew longer, warmer, curious, not confrontational. Saw your team in that article. Really impressive. You always had this in you. I guess I didn't see it then. I hope you're doing okay. I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness. But because I didn't owe a response to the chapter that closed itself. I lived simply. Same apartment. Same coffee shop. No Porsche. No penthouse. Just peace. And a password-protected doc on my desktop named Proof of Self. Inside it, every journal entry, every rejection, every quiet, trembling moment. I almost quit. Not to revisit the pain, but to remember the man who walked through it. One day, I got invited to a university talk. Topic: how to build something when no one believes in you. I laughed when I read it, because the irony was, if they believed in you from the start, you probably weren't building anything dangerous enough to matter. I went, spoke plainly. No fluff, no humble bragging, just the truth. A student asked, "What's the best revenge?" The room went still. And I answered, "The best revenge is when they have to wonder. Wonder how you got here. Wonder why you never reached out. Wonder what it would have been like if they'd just believed." Pause. And then, you look around your life and realize, you stopped wondering a long time ago. The crowd didn't cheer. They nodded. That deep cellular kind of nodding that said, "I've been there." Afterward, a woman approached. Not from my past. Not from any ghost chapter. Just present. "Your story felt familiar. I haven't built a company, but I rebuilt myself. Quietly, thought I was alone in that." We exchanged names. A slow smile. No promises. No pressure. Just possibility. That night, I walked home. Streetlights humming. City breathing slow. I passed a couple arguing at a bus stop.
It didn't trigger me.
It reminded me of how far I'd come, of who I used to be, of who I chose to become. I reached my door, unlocked it, sat at my desk, opened a fresh document. Title, When They Left, I started, and I wrote the first line. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about remembering who you are. When everyone else forgets, then I hit save and exhaled. Not a victory, not a finish line, just the quiet hum of a life no longer needing to prove itself. And that was the real ending.